Hello, my name's David Diley. Welcome to the Scarlet View. I've just got back from the post office where I've been mailing out the hard drives of the final graded masters for a client, because today we're going to be taking a look at the process of grading a short film for Cannes Film Festival.
It's a Vincent Bach.
And what's a Vincent Bach?
It's a trumpet.
And so it is. Look, if you need money, you want to sell it, I can give you a couple $100 for it.
It's worth a lot more.
Maybe so, dude, but look where you are. Okay, it's not an iPad. People want electronics. What am I supposed to do with a trumpet?
So we've received the drive from the client, we've hooked it up to the edit and grading suite, and thankfully everything seems to be communicating properly. We've opened up the final locked edit project, which is this one, A Precious Life Jimmy 2008, which was finalized by Jimmy Gadd over in California. And it looks great. This is what I want to see when I receive a project for a grade. One single video track, nothing over the top, nothing layered over, no text or anything like that. Nice and clean, nice and simple. This is exactly how, as a colorist, you want to receive the project which you're going to be grading. So the first stage that I do is take the reference video of that locked edit, and that's something I always ask for from a client. Send me a reference video of the official confirmed locked edit. So we layer that over the top here and line it up so it's all exactly at the end. Now the reference video has been upscaled by 34%, I believe. Now we're not going to be doing that in the final delivery. If any shots do need to be reframed, I will be doing that myself. So in this case, if you see the difference, there we go, that's the original, that's the project sequence, and that's the reference video. Not ideal, but it's not a huge problem, because what we're going to do is we're going to turn the opacity down on the reference video down to 50% and then play this through. The reason that we're doing that is making sure that every clip that's in the project sequence matches up with the clips from the reference video. So we know that when we're exporting an XML and putting it into Resolve, it's putting the correct clips in there to be graded, because what we don't want is to grade something, send it out, put it back into this project, export the master, and then hear back from the client that there's different clips in there. We definitely don't want that. So this is what we do to check it. So when that's all been checked through, we remove the reference video and then we save the project and then send it out as an XML, which will then open up in Resolve. Okay, so here we are in Resolve. The project has been moved over now for the grading side of it. Obviously, the project is now pretty much near to completion. So what we're going to do is I'll take you through the stages as though we're doing it the first time, and then we'll take a look at a couple of clips and the grading on that. So unfortunately, I haven't had time to actually do one of these episodes as I've been actually working on the project, because I've been on a very, very tight deadline. So to begin with, we would go into the hard drive where the project is and then select everything within that project, all the media, where all the clips that you're going to be grading are going to come from. We select all of those and then drag them down into the media pool here. The media pool is where the XML will link up to the clips. So if you've got everything in here, your XML should read correctly. Obviously, we've already exported that XML into the project. So if you don't know how to do that, you come into File, Import XML, locate the XML where you've sent it from Premiere Pro, and then open it up, and it should just open up in Resolve for you without any problems. So then the next stage is that we go into the grade panel and start the grade. Okay, so we're in the grading panel now for Resolve, and I'm going to pick a couple of clips that I've graded for you for the film to give you an idea of the look that we're going for and why. Now, the guy that you see in the shot here, this is Fraser Precious. He's the writer, director, and lead actor. He plays the character of Finlay Precious. The film is actually based on a true life story, so it's quite a personal story for Fraser, and it's about a musician who is kind of falling into the depths of mental illness. His life is really gone off the rails, and in this particular scene he's in a pawn shop. The only thing he's got left of any value is his trumpet, which he's having to sell to survive. So it's quite an emotional scene. It's not something which is happy by any stretch. So the look that we're going for with this, and Fraser hasn't given too much direction on this. He's allowed me to build the look really from the ground up based on the story itself, and we both agreed that it would be good to go cold and gritty, quite grimy, and just give it that real sort of edgy look, and Fraser very much agreed with that. So that's what we've done, and this particular scene is really good to highlight that. So I'm going to show you how we actually built this this look for this scene using Fraser. So the first thing that we need to know is that it was shot on the Sony FS7 in S-Log in full HD. So we have a very flat picture profile. The Sony cameras, particularly the FS7 and FS5, have quite a strong bias towards green, and we don't want that in there. So what I've actually done to give myself a better starting point is alter the log format. So if we go into this here, we started out using color space transform. So from S-Log into Arilog C, then I passed it through Arilog C into Rec 709 and created a compound node so that I could copy that onto the other similar clips in the same scene. So that was stage one, which was giving ourselves a good starting point. Now, because we want that cold, gritty look, obviously the greens in here, and it's edging on the warmer side, we don't want that. So with the balance, I have pushed in an awful lot of blue and taken that green out. Obviously the green is still there in the jumper, it's still in the hair, it's still in elements of the face, kind of a bit yellowy, but obviously we'll come to fix that in a little bit. But in terms of as a starting point, we get the backdrop, the background of the scene looking cold, and it's not a welcoming place. It's not a place where he wants to be, so we don't want any warmth in there. Next up was getting the skin tone right, and again doing some more work on the background. So we introduced a layer mixer in there. This lower layer here is for the skin. As you can see, the selection is quite rough and ready. It didn't need to be so exact. So basically I got everything that I wanted to get within the skin. We've got a little bit of overspill over here, but I wasn't overly concerned about that. It has been masked off somewhat because of obviously everything else in here thankfully wasn't getting picked up in that selection. I really didn't feel the need to put any power windows in here to take that out, because when we worked on the background, we just desaturated everything basically. So we took the saturation down and made sure that, as you can see down here in the saturation, we're down at 30. So we altered the skin tone, then desaturated everything, which then led us on to here where we added a film stock and then worked within that film stock in terms of contrast in particular. Just did a little bit of a log grade in there as well within the film stock to really give it some punch. And as you can see from the difference from the starting point just to now in the film stock, we've got that warmth in there, the greens in there. Now there's quite a heavy push towards blue with a little bit of magenta in there, but the skin tone is looking nice and natural. We then completed the grade by desaturating the low end and desaturating the high end as well. And then if we come out, that's the raw, the log footage that came from the camera, and that is the graded footage. So if we watch it through ungraded, and then if we watch it through again, this time with the grade on, it just looks a lot more punchy, a lot more gritty, and very, very cinematic. Okay, so the next clip that we're going to take a look at, we have Sarah, who is Finlay's girlfriend in the film, and she's come in and she's very, very upset with him because Finlay's just had a meltdown at someone in the orchestra. So she's in this kitchen here, which obviously we can see the back. It's very white walls with a kind of creamy, ecru-y type coloured cupboards. And there's not a huge amount of colour contrast in here, apart from down here we have the pots, the books and everything. So again, it's leaning towards a very, very warm palette, and we do not want warmth in this. We want it to be quite clinical and quite cold. So the first thing that I did was do a basic balance. Now that was essentially almost kind of fixing the white balance. It was taking a lot of that warmth out, flattening the image out, cooling it down, and getting that white tiling in the background to be white. So we've done that through Color Space Transform by passing it through the Arilog C format again, and then doing the balance within the Arilog C format. So it's given us a much better starting point to this clip. Following that, the next node is the contrast and saturation. Now, knowing that I was going to be taking some saturation out, I wanted to give it a basic balance just so it looked good from a starting point in terms of the exposure, in terms of the contrast. If we come in to the scopes here, we're just kissing the black down there, and that is Sarah's skirt. So we're not really losing any detail in that, but I wanted quite a punchy look with it, without the high range being too high. So I'm happy with how that looks. Obviously it looks a lot more balanced now in regards to the overall color. So we'll get rid of the scopes. Following that, the next stage was, okay, we want to make this even cooler. So again, that's pushing in towards the blues. So you already notice between the two, if you look at the background, it still has that slight green hue to it, slight yellowy green hue coming out the camera. And we've got rid of that. So again, very clinical, very cold white, which was definitely the look they wanted to go for. Not the most welcoming environment, which helps because Sarah here is very upset and not in the most welcoming mood for poor Finlay, who's just trying to practice his trumpet. So following that, the next step that I wanted to do was include a film stock, which was quite subtle. Again, it's just bringing out the contrast a little bit more, and I did some more work and corrections again within the film stock. So if we notice here, particularly around Sarah and around the blouse, it just brings out the highlights a little bit. I decided not to do any work specifically on the skin tone because the skin tone is already, she has a nice skin tone anyway, it's already quite nice. And when I did actually try doing that, it was picking up too much of this and it was just polluting everything around it because there's not a great deal of contrast between the two. And she actually looked pretty good without that anyway. So we didn't need to worry about that. So here's a good starting point. If we look at that on full screen, we're already pretty much almost there. If we notice in the background, these books here, this pot, etc., a little bit distracting. It's nice to have the contrast, but it's a little bit overbearing. So I did a parallel mixer where we selected those reds and also selected the yellow. I could have done a little bit better of a selection with that. Just to get the heavy sort of color out of it, and then passed it through to that for a final desaturation. So if we take these out, particularly the reds, if you take just in, it's a little bit, it's a bit oversaturated. It doesn't look particularly filmic. So we brought those down a little bit. So we're getting more focus on Sarah, and then finished it off by desaturating the low end and the high end. So if we look at everything without a grade on, so this is the raw log format, and she's not very happy at all. I think we've all been in that position. And then we have the grade on. It's just a big, big difference. And I really quite like how that's come out. So we'll go into that full screen. Ungraded, ungraded. Right, so last but not least, the final shot I want to take a look at is this one. Now, it doesn't look particularly exciting or anything in particular special, but if we take the grade off it, this is a nightmare for colorists because you have human beings against this kind of wood paneling background, and when you're trying to make skin selections, it can be very, very difficult. And what we don't want to do is we don't want the people to blend into the background. I mean, they're lit well here, so this makes it a little bit easier, but we do want to make sure that they stand out a little bit more, plus just make it look a lot more filmic. So the first thing that we did with this was to do the balance. And that was essentially, it was quite a lot of contrast, boost the saturation, and bring some blues in there. Try and take some of that warmth out, take some of the green out, introduce a slightly cooler look to it. But we didn't want to go too cool because this is Finlay in some happier times, as you can see there. We see him smiling. Don't see him smiling a lot through the film, so we wanted to make sure that this looks like it is a time when his life is kind of going a lot better than it is later on. So we've got quite a nice starting point here. Then follow that up by working on the skin tone. So that was kind of the main thing. Now, if you look at the actress here, her skin tone before the balance, it's nice. She's got good skin tone. And then when we put that basic balance in, it's there. The skin tone still looks nice, but it does have that kind of yellowy tint, looking a little bit muddy against that background. So if we turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. So that green is now gone, and she's pushed into a much more healthy, magenta-y, olive-y skin kind of look. And just the difference it makes from making her stand out the background along with Fraser, it just looks a lot nicer. They'll actually look kind of more like human beings now, which is definitely what we want. And it didn't impact on the background either. So with the skin tone, it was pushing it into the warmer side with a little bit of magenta in there. Also, if you see here, the selection was pretty good. If we turn that off. Working on the contrast in the skin tone as well, so pushing the contrast up a little bit, just brightening them up, but not too much so that they, again, don't look natural. So following working on the skin, we then added a film stock and did a lot of work within that film stock to really drag any element of green and yellow out there. So if you notice here, if we look at the paneling over here, just the difference of adding that in, it just brings that yellowy green out, flattens it down a little bit, and in turn it really makes Fraser and the actress here, character is Amelia, makes Finlay and Amelia really, really stand out from the background, and then draws the focus in towards them. And it's starting to look really quite nice. Then the final node was a desaturation of the high and the low, and then just lifting the gamma up a little bit just to bring the overall shot up a little bit more, flatten it out, give it that slightly more filmic look. So if we go into the full screen, so we have graded, ungraded, graded again. So if we play the scene through, that's graded, and then ungraded, it looks a whole lot nicer with that grade on it. Okay, so that's 3 shots from A Precious Life. What we need to do now is when we have the when we have the grade completely finished, we then need to go into the delivery and export everything out. The way that we do that is we come in, we go choose Premiere XML, which will create another XML of all the graded clips, and we'll send those out, each clip as an individual graded clip, which we then load back into Premiere and then make sure that everything is correct on top of the project. So we're going to come out of Resolve now and go back into Premiere Pro. Okay, so we've put the project back into Premiere Pro. All the graded clips have come in and have been layered on top of the raw clips down below. So you'll see in blue here is the original timeline sequence from sent over by Jimmy, and in purple on top we have all the graded clips. Now within each graded clip there's been some denoising, there's been some sharpening, and we've added some film grain in there as well. Fraser did say he wanted to go quite heavy on the grain, and so we have done, and it does give it that lovely textured film look to it, which has come out really nice. So everything's been checked over multiple times, and now we have to make 2 versions. So because, as I said before, this film is going to Cannes, the premiere for the film is in a couple of days. Actually, it's in 2 days, on the 2nd of May. And so what we want to do is we need to make a backup, and we need to make a DCP because it's going to Cannes. So we have a full HD master, and we've added the crop lines on the top. So if we take them off, you'll notice there that's the full screen, and then we've added the crop lines on. And in the DCP version, the resolution here is 2048 by 858, so it fits the CinemaScope DCP standard. So you'll notice that we don't have the crop lines above because we don't need them. It will just add them in automatically. So it's a slightly different format, and it is upscaling HD effectively to 2K, which is not something I would recommend normally doing. But in this case we are, and it does seem to have come across quite well. The footage looks good in this format. So we have a DCP that we need to send out, and we have a full HD master that we need to send out. So the next stage is we take out the DCP first, we create a DCP master, which is going to be in DNX HR at 2048 by 858. RGB 444, maximum depth, everything as high res as possible. So we will create that master, and then following that we will then make the HD full master, which is 1920 by 1080. That's going to be in DNX HD HQX 10-bit. And that's going to be a master to make any copies for online streaming or any higher resolution MP4, for screening backups, the Blu-ray that needs doing. So we need to make a lot of copies of this, but the most important is the DCP and the full HD master. So when they're rendered out, what we'll do is export that out to a separate project folder, and then we will make the DCP from the DCP master. Right, so that DCP has been exported out, and as you can see, there's its own file here, its own folder, sorry, and we get all of this stuff in there, which is everything that the DCP needs. Now, the most important folder in here is this one here. This is what the projector at the cinema down in London and then the cinema in Cannes will actually ingest into their system to then project onto the screen. So if we click into that, we have all the assets here. So we have the video, we have the audio, everything in here which the projector needs to read from to then project the file. So this has been done. Now we need to put this on a single USB stick. So if you're sending a DCP out to anywhere, you make sure you get a clean, unused, ideally brand new USB stick that fits the project, and only put this stuff on. Don't put anything else on that USB stick, just this folder. Simply take this and copy it over. Otherwise, the projector, if there's any files on there which aren't DCP files, it will probably mean that your DCP is not going to work, and you definitely do not want to do that. So we're going to take this, copy onto a USB master stick. We'll then send out all the other masters and put them onto a separate external hard drive to send down to Fraser. Okay, so that was my workflow for completion of A Precious Life. It may be completely different to your workflow, but it doesn't matter. I like the way that I work in this way because I find it very efficient. It helps me keep a clear line of communication with the client and helps me keep on top of the project so I can make sure that I'm delivering on time, in budget, and that the quality is as high as it deserves to be. If yours is different or even completely different, but it works, don't worry. If it works for you, it works. So if you do have a completely different workflow to mine, I'd be really interested to know all about it. So please let me know in the comments down below. Now, you probably noticed the production value of this episode hasn't been the highest. The reason for that is I've been on an incredibly tight deadline and basically trying to do a million things at once. So I still wanted to get this episode out so you could get a glimpse kind of behind the scenes of how projects like this are completed. So sorry about the slightly lower production value, but don't worry, we'll start increasing that again for next time. But what I want to do now is leave some tips and hints, things that you might need to consider. So if you are in the process of planning your own production, which you want to send to some of the major festivals, maybe you're even halfway through it, it's never too late to bear this stuff in mind. It will make completion of your project an awful lot easier, and maybe these are things that you haven't considered. So I hope they're helpful. Before we go into that, I just want to say big thank you to Michael at the Hyde Park Picture House. Thank you so much for letting me come down and check those DCPs. And a big thank you to Andy Woodhead as well. Now, Andy was instrumental in helping us do something technical, which is going to be in the tips and hints that we're about to go into now. So without Andy, we would have been screwed. So big thank you to Andy Woodhead, really appreciate it. If you've got any feedback, if you've got any questions, anything like that, put them in the comments below. Here's a little helpful hints for you, and we'll see you again next time. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and thanks for watching. The first tip to bear in mind, if you are looking to send one of your films, one of your projects over to one of the major festivals, is shoot up and deliver down. Now, what I mean by that is you shoot in a higher resolution than you plan to deliver, ideally, or worst case scenario, shoot in the resolution that you plan to deliver. Now, if you are looking to get your film into Cannes, Toronto, Tribeca, Sundance, South by Southwest, it's pretty certain that they're going to expect that you send a DCP. The minimum resolution on a DCP is 2K. So with this project, the rushes, the raw footage was actually filmed in HD, so it had to be upscaled. Now, it did look good, but that's not ideal. What you want to be doing if you are planning to deliver a 2K DCP is shooting 4K. It allows you to reframe, to crop in, and you don't lose any resolution. When you're downscaling footage, it looks an awful lot better than upscaling footage. So tip 1 is shoot up, deliver down. Okay, so the second tip is if you are aiming for the bigger festivals, then you're going to be going up against professional competition. So the standard of films is going to be very high. So in the post-production side of things, make sure that you've got enough time for post-production to be done properly, and that you've got a budget in there to hire professionals. So editors, colorists, sound designers, composers, make sure that your footage, your story, the script, the acting is done justice by professionals. What you don't want to do is have all the right ingredients there for a great film, which is then thrown together and its potential isn't realized because you're relying on favors from friends or trying to task load yourself and do it yourself. You want professionals who are used to working with professional productions, and that does mean that you are gonna have to pay them. So at the stage where you're planning your production, keep an eye out, have a look for the right kind of people that can deliver for you, and get into conversations with them early. Get them involved in the project early. Make sure you know what their expectation is in regarding their rate. Make sure you budget for it, get it confirmed, put it in writing, and make them feel like a part of the team, a part of the production. When it comes to post-production, that will make everything a much more efficient and streamlined workflow. Tip 3 is plan for the DCP. We've mentioned DCPs a few times in this episode, but they are incredibly important for the bigger festivals. So if you don't know anything about DCPs, don't worry, you are not alone. If you don't know anything about DCPs, find someone who does and get them to make it for you. Now, they may be able to do it for you as a favor, they might charge you a little bit, but if it takes that headache away from you, it's definitely worth it. Now, as I've said earlier in the episode, there's software to check them at home, which can be cheap, free, or very expensive. My preferred method is always testing it on a projector in a cinema. Reach out to your local independent cinema. They may well be quite happy for you to go down and test your DCP down there, and along the way, you might make some great contacts as well. The other thing to bear in mind with DCPs is for CAN, their stipulation is compulsory that you deliver a DCP in EXT3 format. Now, EXT2, EXT3, and EXT4 are the industry standards, and it's a Linux system. So if you're on a Linux operating system on your home computer, great, you can format a drive to EXT2, 3, or 4. If you're on Windows or Mac, then you might not be able to. I did try and download EaseUS Partition Manager to do it myself, and it just did not work for me at all. I do not know why, but it just refused to work. In the end, I had to go to a friend's house, Andy, thank you Andy, who runs Linux and who really knows his IT, who's able to format the drive and get the DCP onto an EXT3 formatted drive. So bear that in mind. If you don't run Linux at home, find someone who does, who can format these drives for you. If you can get the software to work and you're on Windows or Mac, great, you don't need to worry about it. But if you can deliver in EXT3, EXT4, and EXT2, then you're going to be okay on a projector system. If not, go for NTFS. But just please be aware that CAN, if you're delivering for CAN, it has to be EXT3. The final tip I'm going to give you is probably seems quite obvious, but it's very rare that projects actually work out this way. But if you can factor in a period of time between your completion date and when that first screening date is, then you could save yourselves an awful lot of headaches. What you don't want is a completion date that's 2, 3, 4 days before the first screening. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you do have to complete so close. But if you can manage that to the point whereby when the project is locked off, you've got locked edit, the grade's done, the sound design is done, the composition's done, you have a master and you have a copy that you can review. If you've then got a 2 or 3 week period between then and the first screening, you are in a really, really good place, because you can then check for any tiny little errors that creep in. And errors do creep in, because if you're chasing a deadline, you will work very, very long hours, you can get very, very tired, and you can miss things. It's only human, don't worry about it. People do miss things. So if you're giving yourself the opportunity to actually have a chance to check it and have other people check it as well, it gives you that opportunity where if you find an error, you can fix it in time, because you're then going to have to remake all the masters that you need, and then you're not panicking and doing this the night before a screening. So the final tip is, if you can give yourself time between completion and screening, aim for 2 weeks if possible. You can give yourself 3, even better.